My mother made the mistake of showing me the original Frankenstein when I was 4 years old. And when she came to, grab me at the end of the film, I was crying and she thought, oh my God, I've traumatized my son. What did I do? What did I do? And then she started talking to me and realized that I wasn't scared of Frankenstein. I actually had this tremendous empathy, even at 4 years old, for the monster, because everybody's so rotten to him in the movie, and really all he wants is to belong. And for some reason I picked up on that at a really, really young age, and I just, at that point, decided that I was the protector of all monsters. I'm a creative director for the theme park for Universal Studios, which is basically a carny or a professional 10-year-old. I think with these particular characters, and it's what a lot of horror movies forget in the modern era, is that the great power of the Universal Classic Monsters is that all of the characters, with the exception of maybe Dracula because he was pure evil, almost all the other characters are sympathetic. If you have, Frankenstein didn't ask to be created. He was stitched together from the, dead parts of criminals that were hung, and then given life. And then through the whole movie, he's just trying to find out where he belongs in life. And everywhere he goes, he's greeted by the people who supposedly aren't monsters, but they act like monsters. They're trying to kill him and harm him. Through all of the Frankenstein movies, that theme runs. And the same thing with, Phantom of the Opera. It's all about love. So I think there's great power in that because people can empathize with it. I think that's why I relate to him so much. Because I was an odd kid, I had a hell of a lot of, sympathy and understanding of Frankenstein, I think we're all trying to do, what he's trying to do in that movie. He's just trying to find out where they belong in the world, And the world's a scary place.
She's alive! Alive!
Being who I am and being a person who's so obsessed with the history of these movies, I make sure they know the people I work with, because let's face it, a lot of people coming up today, if they're coming out of high school or college, maybe they're going to work a job at Halloween Horror Nights, there's a lot of them who have no clue who Bela Lugosi was, or Boris Karloff, or what Frankenstein was, or Dracula. I'm sure they know the name, but they've never seen these films. And we do a thing at Halloween Horror Nights called Terror Tram, where we let people get off the tram and walk through our back lot. It's the only time of the year we ever do this. And we let them walk right past the real Base Motel and the real Psycho House. And I give a speech every year to all of those people that are going to be in this cast and let them know you are standing right now in the place where the horror movie was born. We are in the Monster Room. This is my tribute to the classic Universal horror films of the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. This is pretty much my sanctuary. If I need to write, come up with ideas for Halloween or come up with ideas for work, I usually come up here. I think part of the reason people collect weird stuff like this is it's kind of an attempt to recapture your childhood. I grew up with all these characters. They're, from the earliest times I went trick-or-treating, I was either Frankenstein or the Mummy or any of the Universal Classic monsters. And as we get older, the more and more, you lurch towards adulthood and beyond, and all the responsibilities life has that come with it. Especially if you create things for a living and have to act like a 10-year-old, you need to stay in touch with your childhood. So this has always been my touchstone for, whenever I need to get back in touch with why I wanted to do this in the first place. This is where I go to be most at peace with myself. I started collecting, from the time I was a little kid, and I grew up in the 1970s, and there was a major monster revival going on in the 1970s. All of the movies were being rerun on television, and that's when you saw a big push when the first kind of toys started coming out. There was little stuff, occasionally things that would show up in the 50s, early 60s, especially with the Aurora monster models. I think that was probably the big kickoff point. But then there was just this flood of it in the 70s, and now it still continues. I'm absolutely amazed that every time I turn around, there's a new monster product coming out, and now they're being made much more elaborate and much more like the actor's likeness from the movies. So even if I wanted to, I don't think I could possibly track down every single Universal monster toy, although I've certainly tried. I think the films are art, no question. I think, The Bride of Frankenstein is a classic piece of art. I think, the classic Aurora monster models are so iconic now that I think they've maybe pop art. I don't know if they're true fine art. I look at, the bust of Bela Lugosi, and I think that's art, absolutely. That's an amazing achievement for the person who sculpted that. The Frankenstein figure with the bride, it somehow captures that great moment in The Bride of Frankenstein where the bride has just come to life in the lab, and Frankenstein kind of comes up to her and just puts his hand on her shoulder, and right after that she does that classic scream, and then he blows everybody to hell. I think there's other things in the toy world that would fall into the other category of, it's disposable. It depends on, this survived because I cared about it as a kid. A lot of these pieces were things, when you're a kid, you play with things, you grow older and you discard them. The things you keep must resonate with you, and I think that's, true of art as well. The funny thing is that I've never even attempted to estimate what it's worth. It has nothing to do with the money, absolutely. I mean, it only has to do with the money in that, justifying to, my wife why I need to, spend several $100s on a painting of Phantom of the Opera or something that I find, That's the only time money enters into it. It really has nothing to do with money. I've always, ever since I was a little kid, the first time I saw Frankenstein, I've always felt so bad for the monsters and empathized with them so much growing up that I always felt like, for some reason, like their protector, or I had to, protect them from the harm of the world. And so I've just assembled all these things, and they're safe here, if that makes any sense.